steering development and also pulling people out of poverty. So the state is important. And he, in that light, was identifying with the young tigers in Eastern Asia, which had already managed to pull themselves from poverty and to bring about development. And that was the main linchpin of his foreign policy, that our foreign policy is developmental, and everywhere it goes, it has to be developmental. Second, Kibaki created a foreign policy that was driven by knowledge. Not only knowledge of ourselves, which was based in Vision 2030, but knowledge of other nations and what they mean to us. Not what they mean to themselves and to others, but what they mean to us. And I'm going to explain that further. And therefore, in this foreign policy, which is based on knowledge, we need men and women of knowledge. We need to put our best and ablest in public offices, in foreign missions, as envoys, and that is the only way we can succeed. He believed strongly in the idea of meritocracy in our diplomacy. Without meritocracy, without having our best out there, those with the technical knowledge, those with scientific knowledge, we cannot go far. Third, President Kibaki based our foreign policy on our national interest, not on what he believed in, not on what those in his government believed in, but what we knew as our foreign policy. I know he asked the National Security Council to define clearly what our national interests are. I teach at the National Defense University, and anytime, because that's the course I teach, I always go through them without change because they are cast in concrete. Top of those is our development, our national economic development. The fourth and the final pillar is a foreign policy propelled by 1, Kenyan nationalism, 2, Pan-Africanism, and 3, principles of humanism internationally, that all human beings are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights and powers as well. And therefore, the foreign policy is subordinated to the interest of our people. It cannot serve individual interest. And what did he do about the orientation of this foreign policy? I know Professor Chege has talked about Kibaki Rook East policy. No, Kibaki's policy was not neither Rook East nor Rook West. It had 4 aspects to it. 1, it was African-centered. Kenya is an African state. We are guided Pan-Africanism as our ideology, and our interests of Africa come first before any other interest. And therefore, we are Afrocentric in our orientation. Second, we Rook West. We re-Rook West. Listen, re-Rook West. He said we cannot abandon traditional relationship with the West. But what we need to do is to subordinate those relationships with the West to our national interest. And therefore, in addition to our embassy in London, he decided that we are going to open a new embassy in Dublin. And people are asking, why do we have to have 2 embassies? Because Dublin was the European capital of IT. This is where the technology was at that time really flourishing. Without that move, I'm not sure we would have made M-Pesa. Because Kibaki knew that we need to deepen ourselves in Dublin and the European technological movement so that we become a technological nation. And that's why Kenya is the leading African nation in technology. There's no other move. He also decided that we are going to Madrid, Spain, whereas Madrid was never, Spain was never a colonizer in Africa. Why? Because Spain is a source of our technology, it's also a source of tourists who want to come to Africa, and many other aspects that were coming in. So that is what we are calling relooking the West, not abandoning the West, but looking deeper into the West from the prism of our national interest. Third, we look East. And by East, he did not define it as China. he said we look at the whole East, including Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, and so on. But more primarily to China. Why? Because these are emerging economic powerhouses. And they had deep resources that we could tap to finance our development, particularly our infrastructure. I was part of the delegation of the government to New York, I think around 2006, when we wanted to refurbish our railway, to build a new railway. And that proposal was put before the World Bank by President Kibaki's team. It was rejected, and they said, refurbish the old railway, privatize it, and then all will be given unto you. After doing that, the railway essentially grounded to a halt, and 95% of our cargo had to move by road, and the consequences are familiar to us. So President Kibaki went to China with a very singular issue. We need to open our infrastructure, our roads, our railways, our ports, and all the arteries of our economy. That was what Look East policy was like. But Kibaki did not just look east. Finally, he looked south. And looking south here meant that we went to Brazil, and there we got our airlines, the Embla and others. So we looked elsewhere. So those are the four orientations of Kibaki's legacy. And in conclusion, let me say this. In line with President Kibaki's legacy, in decades and centuries to come, Kenya will have its low moments. But one of us will rise and will lift us from that lowness and bring us to greatness, bring us to prosperity, bring us to self-pride as a nation.